Hi, this is John Kohler with GrowingYourGreens.com. Today we have another exciting episode for you. My last day here in Maui. I'm sad to be actually flying out of here tonight, but I'm really happy actually because I'll be seeing my girlfriend tomorrow. But anyways, aside from that, why I'm here today in a standard residential neighborhood actually is not because somebody's growing a front yard garden, which I wish more people were growing front yard gardens. What I'm doing today in a residential area is actually filming a video for you guys about an aquaponics farm that happens in a backyard of a standard residential tract home. There's many reasons for aquaponics in this particular situation, and I want to let you guys know, even if you do live in a residential tract home, you can have a farm and grow food to distribute to people. You know, even more so, the farm that I'm going to be visiting today in this residential neighborhood is certified organic, which is amazing. And even more so, they're not just growing things in raised beds like I do, which I believe is the easiest way to grow things because nature is self-balancing. They're actually taking it to the next level and growing things under aquaponics. So that can be a little bit more challenging than growing in the soil because that you need to basically balance things out. And if you don't do it right, your plants and your fish are not going to be as bountiful, taste as good as they possibly can. So I guess the next step is let's go ahead and head to the backyard to share with you guys aquaponics no Ka'oi, which actually means aquaponics is the best, something like that. And after eating some of the food that's grown here, I'm definitely say it's ono man, or ono means the best in Hawaiian. So now I'm gonna go ahead and walk down the alley, which leads to the backyard to share with you guys this farm, literally here in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Now, you know, this farm is more of my model on how I believe agriculture should be done. You know, if you're gonna be dependent on agriculture, right, it should be decentralized, right? Right now, agriculture is really centralized and there's big farms producing a lot of food and they're in one place, California, and then that food, lettuce or whatever is growing, has to get shipped to Hawaii, shipped to New York, shipped to Texas, you know, shipped to Kansas, you know, shipped all over. I think this is very intensive on the planet's resources and not the best way to do things, you know, also for the quality of the crops. I always want to encourage you guys to select locally grown crops whenever you can, and even better yet than locally grown is to grow it yourself. So actually that's how they started here at aquaponics no Ka'oi, is because they started aquaponics just to have some food for themselves to eat because they realized that we are the food we eat, and they were not happy with the food that's being imported from California not being as fresh. And you know, much like me, they said, hey, we could do it better ourselves, and that's what they did. About 4 years ago, they started off with aquaponics, a little small setup, and it started working for them and they started getting really productive, and then they just slowly and surely expanded and into making it you know, commercial business. Now, one of the jokes that was told earlier today by the farmer is that you can make a small fortune in aquaponics. The way to do that is if you start with a large fortune, you buy all your aquaponic stuff and start doing it, and then you end up with a small fortune. So this is definitely not a get rich quick scheme, although you can make a living at it if done properly. You know, as we're gonna see back there, he produces a lot of lettuce that he sells, you know, locally, currently at Whole Foods, but hopefully he'll start selling it, you know, direct to the customer to actually increase his margin, because he's basically getting wholesale price, and you know, when you're selling things wholesale, you don't make as much money when you sell them retail. So anyways, let's go back down the alley and share with you guys the whole process of how he grows food in his backyard and really ramps up the production, and he's able to grow a lot of heads of lettuce in just a small amount of space. And this space he calculated is less than 1/10 of an acre, and he's producing a lot of lettuce on 1/10 of an acre. So let's go ahead and head back there. So when you walk into the backyard, you know, you're not seeing a normal backyard, and when you walk into my backyard, you're not seeing a normal backyard either. You're seeing all plants and raised beds and a whole big jungle. But I'm not seeing a jungle back here because they're not farming in that way. They're doing the aquaponics. So there's a lot of advantages to the aquaponics. You know, for example, you know, in about a week's time, it loses only 5% of the water that needs to be replenished. So it's a much more sustainable way, and in times of drought, you know, like many places are, this is an excellent way to save water. You know, the other thing is that in a small space, right? And I don't know if I could even be productive in growing this many lettuces in soil, because some of these lettuces are really packed in there pretty tight, as you guys are going to get to see in a minute. But in this whole operation here is, once again, less than 1/10 of an acre. They're growing 3,000 heads of lettuce this time, although they could do other crops, right? 3,000 heads of lettuce. They have over 300 pounds of fish growing, which is another item they could sell or choose to use themselves. They have about 900 gallons of water that house the fish, and overall they're using about 5,400 gallons of water total. I mean, because literally this is like the water is basically the transport mechanism, you know, for the nutrition for both the plants as well as the fish. So anyways, what we're gonna do now is check out some of these different hoop houses, share with you guys actually how they're set up, because it's actually done very well, and go over some of the nuances and the specifics of the aquaponic system here, so that you'll be more familiar with how an aquaponic system works, and whether you want to set up a small scale system for yourself, or maybe even have a backyard farm like they do here, you'll know, you know, how more to do that, you know, because of this video. So let's go ahead and take a walk around. So the system that's being used here is called aquaponics. And basically, unlike hydroponics, which is basically growing things in water, aquaponics is you're growing fish. Like they have some beautiful, man, like large, like, I don't know, 18-inch large koi fish. I don't know if you guys see them swimming around. They just fed them there, but they look amazing, man. They're super huge. And they got the koi fish here, and this is just kind of like a little sample demonstration aquaponics setup. They got the koi fish here. Basically the water, you know, the fish are peeing and pooping in the water, and that's actually nutrition for plants. So they take the water, in layman's terms, and they pump it over, or actually don't even pump it over, but there's a gravity fed into this little tube here. That tube then runs to this next big container, which then the water is distributed in through the rock media, which acts as one layer of filtration. And then there's also biofiltration. This is actually called a biofilter. There's beneficial microbes in there that's breaking down the nutrients in the fish poo and pee that are now feeding these amazingly tall ginger plants. You guys can't really see there. And in addition to the bacteria, there's also beneficial organisms such as worms and these other little crustacean-like creatures that are literally, you know, taking out the toxins in the fish poop and making it a bioavailable nutrients for these plants. And check it out, these plants here, by the looks of it, are definitely loving it. So I mean, that's the basics. I have a really good episode going into the basics of what aquaponics is if you want more of a, you know, schooling on that. So I'll put a link down below this video for that one if you haven't seen that one already. And this, I'm gonna just maybe go over the process that they're doing here, and, you know, really focus on how much yield they can produce in a small amount of space. You know, whether you guys want to feed your family or start your own backyard farm, I want to give you guys options and create options for you guys on what is truly possible in a small amount of space. I mean, as much as I wish I lived on 10 acres like some of the farms you just saw in previous episodes, you know, to grow all my own food, I don't. I live in a standard American tract home like many of you guys, and I chose to grow in soil beds. And once again, you know, you could have a debate of what's better, John, soil or aquaponics? Well, I'll tell you this much, after talking to the farmer and from my previous experience, growing in soil is so much more easier than growing aquaponically, and we're going to get into the reason for that in a little bit. I mean, the main reason is because in soil, nature is a balancer. Nature balances things out. If you put a little bit of too much of this, too much of that, you know, the soil will work itself out. But in aquaponics, you need to pay more attention. You need to figure out the pH, how much ammonia is in there, you know, what other kind of nutrients you may need to add in the aquaponics so that your plants will do good, because you know the fish don't produce everything the plants need. You know, for example, the fish produce about 10 of the 13 of what traditional agriculture or people in universities say the plant needs. Now, I do not agree with that figure at all. I mean, the question is, how do we really know what a plant needs? Do they really need only 13 nutrients, or maybe 16 or 15, what some people say? I mean, you know, yes, while they will grow with those, I don't believe that the plant will be at its best, at its peak performance with those nutrients, you know, with that many nutrients. I'll give this analogy for you guys out there. I mean, human beings, a standard adult male needs about 2,000 calories a day to live, to function, is what, you know, the government says. And, you know, is there a distinction between going out to McDonald's and eat 2,000 calories at McDonald's, which is about, I think, 2 Big Macs, maybe even 1.5 Big Macs, 2,000 calories of Big Macs, you know, and people are living fine, they're growing and they're getting fat on Big Macs? Or would it be better to eat 2,000 pounds of fresh fruit and fresh vegetables grown in your garden, right? Now, when I put it in that terms, you know, yeah, one is definitely healthier than the other, right? And in the same 2,000 calories, if you're eating fruits and vegetables, you're getting a lot of vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, and phytonutrients, and antioxidants, and all these things. And in the burger, you're getting a lot of calories and fat, and not a whole lot of these other nutrients, right? And that's kind of my opinion. Like, people could live on McDonald's, and yes, plants could live on a limited amount of nutrients, but why not give and offer the plants, you know, all the different nutrients that is available on Earth? And, you know, so that's more my gardening style that I like to do in my soil-based garden, but I would also transition into doing in an aquaculture, aquaponic system, because I believe it is so important. So I will, in this video, explain some ways you can actually introduce trace minerals into your aquaponic system to ensure your plants get everything they need, you know, instead of just the 13 or 16 minerals that, you know, big education says you need. Because, you know, here's a disclaimer too, I never went to school for, you know, for biology or horticulture, none of that stuff. I'm just self-taught, and I want to encourage you guys, you know, instead of going to some university to take an aquaponics class and to learn gardening, learn by doing. Watch my videos. You know, my videos, you know, are good in some senses because I think out of the box, because I don't have a horticulture degree. I don't know none of this stuff that people talk about half the time, but I'll tell you what works, right? And some people out there don't even want to care how things work. They just want to know what I add to the soil so that it will work. And yes, that's what you guys get in my videos if you don't want to get educated, because I mean, I've learned literally all my gardening knowledge by couple ways: the School of Hard Knocks, doing it myself, and number two, more importantly, visiting places, you know, such as the farm I'm at today and other places I've visited here in Maui and all over the country when I travel, to see how people are growing, what's working and what isn't, and then basically I incorporate different bits and pieces from everybody's different style that I see works into my style. So I got the best of all the worlds that I've visited, and because I make these videos for you guys too, now you guys could pick out those little nuggets out of the videos that, you know, you want to incorporate and test and experiment with in your particular situation. And the other thing I super recommend you guys is always experiment, test, because that's how we learn and grow, right? If you always did the same thing with a rigid mindset, right, you're never going to try something out of the box. You're never going to think out of the box. I mean, I'm an out of the box thinker. I think I was just born this way. I think a bit differently and say some off, you know, kilter jokes sometimes too. But I mean, I think that's what makes me a better person, and more importantly, a better gardener. So I guess with that, let's go ahead and get into how this system is growing here and how they're able to grow a lot of food in a small amount of space. All right, so what we're looking at now is how all the plants are started here at the farm. You know, they start everything from seed here at the farm. And as you guys can see, they got this basically this large table here that is fed with the same little demonstration system that I just saw you that feeds the ginger plants, you know, that I showed you guys. Now, you know, like I think it was like maybe once or twice a day, basically a pump comes on and all the water is fed into this table here, and it basically goes up to a certain height, you know, and it basically what happens is these trays here wick up the water. I want to be kind of careful pulling these guys out to show you guys. But basically, these guys wick up the water in here. And this mixture is a mixture of basically 60%, 40% coconut coir and vermiculite. And that is, really good to hold the moisture and allow the water to wick up so that these seeds germinate. Now, the cool thing in here is that this is like a production line, like a factory, where things go in the beginning of the factory and then they come out the other side. And that's kind of like they have a little production line here as well, that they move all the plants along at a specified rate. So actually over on this side, the one that I just lifted up, these guys have been in here a little bit of time and they're getting ready to be actually transferred into the next stage. But you could see if you look down this row, like down in the backside, way over yonder, they just planted the seeds, and every day or two they start a new flat or two, and they move all these guys down, and the last guy, that's the largest, gets planted out, basically is how this works. So the guys are in here for about 7 days until they get moved in to the full-blown aquaponics. Now, I always encourage you guys to pay attention to your seedlings, because when your plants are a seedling and when they're a little baby, they're the most delicate. Also, they have the highest probability of getting abused. And if your plants are abused as a seedling, and they're stressed out, right, they will never fully develop into their mature plants and never produce to their genetic potential. And I think this is very important. So one of the things actually that they do here is in these little containers that contain these little net pots with the coir and the vermiculite. Each one of these hold 38, and 38 is also how much their rafts hold. But another thing that I like a lot is actually they're starting them in these little net pots, and these plants live their whole lives in these little net pots without having to be transplanted. So yeah, that's totally cool. So this minimizes transplant shock, which is a form of stress, so I always recommend direct seeding where you're going to plant things if you could do that, and of course sometimes you can't. So then I recommend minimally transplanting, as minimal as you can, because every time you transplant you get some transplant shock, and that may affect in the end your overall yields. So yeah, this looks pretty cool here. So next, let's go ahead and go into one of the hoop houses and share with you guys how the plants are growing and more about the specific system that they're using. So what we're looking at now is basically 4 of the different hoop houses that have the lettuce contained within them. Now, these are more of a modern development. He didn't start with these hoop houses, but after he got the organic certification, he wanted to ensure that, his product was pest-free without having to spray things. I always encourage you guys, to keep burglars, out of your house. You want to lock your doors and make sure they can't get in, and, to keep bugs out of your house, you gotta have screens in your windows. Well, that's simply the principle they're doing here, right? They built a house for their plants, and they have pretty good control on a tight, basically a mesh fabric, as well as some shade cloth to keep all the pests out. This way they're avoiding the pests in the first place so that they don't have to spray even organic certified controls, which can get expensive and also, be a pain in the butt. It's a lot easier to grow a house for it and then basically just exclude them. And you could do this in your guys' raised bed, whether you have a raised bed or an aquaponic system. You could build a framing like this really easily. One of the easiest things to do to build this, because it's just made out of a 1-inch PVC. I can't really expose this and show this to you guys too much, but it's basically 1-inch PVC with all the connectors, and they basically come out the ground, and to go into the ground, you can sink the PVC into the ground. Or another cool idea I saw at one of the farms I visited is they put some rebar into the ground and then basically put the PVC on top of the rebar to kind of hold it firm. And then you basically just take the connectors, and they made these cool arches on here. You could have it more square, but I like this design. And then they got these cool things, man. These are like some really cool clips. These are specially designed clips that I have seen available that you can buy, but if you're ingenuitive, I don't know if that's a word either, but you could just take some PVC and cut it. You get the next larger size and cut it down and bend it or heat it or something. Or you can just buy these little fancy clips that make assembling your hoop house and putting the fabric on super simple and super easy, and they just clip back on. So they could clip things up, they could take it off. Right now they're using about 40% shade cloth right now. They could have higher shade or less shade. and this might be something they want to experiment with to see what the plants do better on. For a period of time, they actually grew without shade cloth, and they had some amazing crops with that. But you know, it's very important also to keep the bugs out, because most people don't want to eat bugs in their stuff, you know. So yeah, I mean, that's why they built this. And I mean, it's super simple. PVC is relatively inexpensive to buy, you know, in really harsh climates with UV. It may degrade over a couple years, but I mean, a big 10-foot section of PVC, well, it depends if you're in Maui or on the mainland, could just be a couple bucks. So, you know, the cost of entry is not that expensive to keep the pests out, so that you don't have to spray them and do all this kind of stuff, which, you know, and most farms do not use, you know, good things to spray. They use highly toxic chemicals. And if you are going to spray, I would encourage you guys to use the least toxic organic controls. Be sure to check my past episodes on that. I have one good episode about it. It's entitled, you know, it's like end your pest problems forever. And basically, I like to use the neem oil and Dr. Bronner's Southside soap. I have another good episode using just something else called diatomaceous earth, which is another good one. Anyways, I guess next let's go ahead and go into one of these guys to show you guys actually how the lettuce is growing. So this is where aquaponics could definitely pay off. I'm in one of the 5 different hoop houses, shade houses that's screened to keep the bugs out and all this kind of stuff. But check it out here. I mean, on either side of me, I have 600 heads of lettuce, or we got some other things growing on this side too, and 600 over on this side. Just in this hoop house here, I think it's like maybe 30 feet long, something like that. 1,200 plants, man. I mean, I don't know if I stuffed lettuce in a raised bed like that's this size, this close together. I mean, I suppose I could do it. But this is just really cool. I mean, check this out. We could just lift this raft up here, and you can see all the little baby roots hanging. These are not yet ready to be harvested. And what they're using is they're using basically polystyrene, basically sheeting that's been extruded, right? That's very important to get the extruded one, because the other ones will flake off on you. And that stuff's pretty resilient on its own, but the problem is this. If the UV and the light is hitting the top of the polystyrene for any length of time, it's gonna flake off and it's gonna get into your water, it's gonna contaminate your system, and that's not gonna be a good thing. So what they do is actually they use a good exterior latex paint to basically just coat the top of it so that the UV coming down does not degrade it. Just make sure when you're putting them in you know, your system, don't put them with the painted side down. But yeah, and then they got basically, I think, 38 plants in each of the rafts. And once again, this is part of the production line technique that I shared with you guys earlier that they do in their seed starting table. They do in here as well. If you guys look way far down at the back, I know you guys could barely see that in the video because I'm not gonna go all the way down there, it's too far to walk. All the way in the back, they got the little baby plants. And basically, you know, as they get more mature, they get moved down the system, you know, all the way down. And then when they get to this end, this is the end they harvest from, and this is also conveniently the end with the door. So they literally roll up the door, take out this whole raft, you know, take this over to the table, and they're able to harvest them. So this is definitely really good because now you're harvesting, instead of having to bend over to harvest, you could just pick up this whole thing and take it to the table, set on the table, and easily at, you know, standing height or sit down on the bench, you could harvest all the lettuce, you know, to get out to the customers. So yeah, definitely really cool. They also have air bubblers in here, which is something I would recommend you guys do in your aquaponic system because we want to aerate the root zone, but not only for the plants, but also control the bacteria and some of the algae growth and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, this looks like some amazing Maui grown lettuce. Now, the lettuce is just one aspect of an aquaponic system. You know, another big aspect, of course, is where the nutrients are coming from for the lettuce, which is the fish. So I want to go ahead and take you guys on a little tour of the fish tanks and all the fish that are creating their peep or their pee and their poo to feed all the lettuce here. So now what we're looking at probably doesn't look like much on the video, but basically we're looking at these stock tanks here. He's got 1, 2, 3 stock tanks, and it's these stock tanks that hold about, I don't know, 300 gallons of water each and about over 100 pounds of fish in each one. And you know, once again, because he is organic, he wants to keep foreign materials and bird poop and all this stuff out, right? And he's built these amazing covers here that's ingeniously designed, which is basically just some PVC. It's kind of like, reminds me of like a hot tub cover. It's the PVC, and then he's got the shade cloth, you know, a dark shade cloth on top so as to not to, you know, get in there to create algae growth. And then he's got these little pipes here on here that's just basically connected with some rope there. Then you can just lift this guy up, check it out, and put this in this little hole, and it's just like a little cover thing, and you could lift up, you could take a look at the fish and feed them when you need to. Now, one of the cool things that I'm noticing here is that he's doing an excellent job taking care of his fish. This is some of the cleanest water I've seen on any aquaponic system, because some of them waters I've seen look pretty dirty. And I believe that's because of this next setup right here. It's just a standard trash can. Now, this may look like a trash can, but it's not functioning as a trash can, because this is a very important ingredient to his system, and I believe if you do start an aquaponic system, should be important to you as well. This is known as a biofilter, right? Some people put like different things in there, like plastic, sponge-like things that kind of filter stuff, but this just does not have that. Let me go ahead and do a close-up on this, because I really want to show you guys what's in here. It's uber cool. So now what we're looking at is this biofilter, and it's just a Rubbermaid Brute trash can. This is commercial quality, right? I want to encourage you guys, when putting your system together, right, you know, get high quality ingredients, or you know, things that aren't going to break down. I mean, he's got some good Rubbermaid stock tanks, nice and heavy duty, as well as these heavy duty garbage cans, not just the cheap one he could get. I mean, because that would work too, but over the long term, you know, that might get a hole in it and all this stuff. But the higher quality stuff, you know, I want you guys to, if you're going to buy things that are going to last a long time instead of just cheap stuff. So anyways, inside here, this is the biofilter, and they got a couple things going on. Number one, they're aerating the biofilter. I really like that he has, I think, about several pumps in this system to aerate the water at different areas, including inside, you know, where the plants are growing, as well as in with the fish, and also inside the biofilters. I mean, oxygen is essential for many forms of life, including us and the plants, as well as the creatures living in here. So another thing that's really cool about this system is that this entire system with all 5 different hoop houses you guys saw is driven with only one pump. And because most of this system is designed on a gravity feed, and that's just amazing. He's basically put things on blocks, and different tanks are at different levels, and it's all, you know, gravity fed, just a little bit different, so that the gravity will take the water wherever it needs until the final step, which then it's boosted up and then drained back in here, and then gravity takes it all the way along. And even more so in this biofilter, he has the water basically coming in here. It goes down to the bottom and then spirals its way up to basically get a lot more contact filter media time with the filtration happening, until then it goes out into the next one. So I mean, there's many ways to do aquaponics. I mean, I believe this to be one of the better ways and one of the better examples that I've ever seen, because he's really taken the time to, you know, figure out what he's doing. He figures out if it's working, if it's not working, and even if it's working, he's like, hey, is there a way I could do it better? And then he improves as he grows, and it's only in this way that, you know, things will ever get better in the world. Because if you learn it like, oh, I learn it like this, I'm never going to change, then what if there's a better way and you can improve your yields, improve the quality of your fish? You could grow things faster, you know, you could use natural methods to filter your water instead of having to resort to chemicals and all these kind of things, right? And they're doing that here. So let's go ahead and dunk my hand into literally fish pee and poo. Ah, tacit, just kidding. All right, so yeah, I mean, the other thing, let's talk about that real quick, is the pH, right? Very important, you know, in an aquaponic system to have the proper level of pH, right? His pH is between 6.5 to 7, and you know, the plants like a certain pH, the fish like a certain pH. So basically, when you're doing aquaponics, you're basically playing God to all the creatures that are alive in your system, because you need to take care of them. You know, he adjusts his pH with some oyster shells, basically. It also adds some calcium into the system, you know, to make it that right pH, so that the bacteria, the microbes, and all the creatures, and the lettuce and the fish could survive properly, you know. And this is why I like soil gardening, because I don't have to be paying attention to the pH for the most part. I mean, you do have to have a range of soil pH as well, but you know, nature will correct itself. But in this system, it's not really auto-correcting, you know, like my spell check, and thank God for spell check on computers. It auto-corrects for me because I spell a lot of bad stuff. But soil is kind of like auto-correcting on spell check, but this system is not. And you know, if you mess up, you go away for a day, your pump stops working, you know, and your water stops flowing, it stops getting aerated, you could lose everything. in one day, whereas in a soil system, yeah, of course it freezes during the winter and in you know the continental United States, and I lose stuff, but it's a lot more auto correcting, so it's a lot easier. And that's one of the reasons why I personally prefer, you know, a soil-based system. But of course, you know, one of these days I will get my hands wet with aquaponics. Hey, maybe it'll be today. All right, so let's go down in here and grab one of these sponges. So as you guys can see, these are just nylon scouring sponges. And like, yeah, this filters the water, but more importantly than these filter the water and collecting stuff, I don't know if you guys could see that on there. Look at that. Look at those little creatures moving. And what these guys are called gammarus. And they're like little crustacean-like creatures. I don't want to like leave them out too long or let them drop around, because we want to get them back in the system working. And what they do is they basically eat all the big particles of poop to make the water clean. And that's one of the reasons why I believe this water is really clean, cleaner than other aquaponic systems I've seen, because they're in there doing their job. And the cool thing is that they appeared naturally one day. And I mean, this is another concept I want you guys to be familiar with, is that, you know, in the nature system, if we were in nature, right, nature's auto-correcting. And another thing I really like about nature is that there is no such thing as waste in nature. Everything is always recycled. The poo is converted by, you know, these creatures into nutrients for the plants, and then they get out all the particulate so that the fish in the next bin, because he has 3 of these basically setups, you know, could have clean water. And the next batch of fish, I mean, you wouldn't be happy to be this batch of fish if you're getting all the poop and pee water from the first batch of fish, right? So they're probably glad for these gammarus in here also. But yeah, these gammarus appeared one day, whether they were brought in on a fish or with some aquatic plants that were brought into the system or somehow. And then guess what? If you provide a good home for creatures, they will multiply and stick around, and they will do the work for you. You know, it's like when I keep worms in my raised bed garden, right? They're breaking down the organic matter. They're making it bioavailable for the plants, and they're making their castings to basically feed my plants nutrients. So, you know, this is something missing in modern agriculture today. They think it's as easy as taking a 10-10-10 bag of fertilizer that's made out of chemicals to feed your plants water-soluble chemicals. And the fact of the matter is clear. Most of the water-soluble chemicals don't feed your plants. They do feed your plants a little bit, but most of them are basically washed out, and then they, you know, pollute the environment and creating dead zones, you know, and all this kind of stuff, which is not good. So I want to encourage you guys always to do organic methods. And organic methods, one of the important criteria is having biofilters in a system like this, or having like bacteria and microbes, you know, in a more of a soil system that breaks down the nutrients and breaks things down to make them more bioavailable for the other components of your system. So anyways, I guess next we could just go through all the different tanks, but I won't bore you with that, because basically he has one tank, goes through the biofilter, he has another tank, goes to another biofilter, then he has another tank, and then he goes through finally a little small bed that actually he used to grow crops in, but after he's got the organic certification, he's not, but he's growing something else really interesting in there that's important for not only soil-based gardening, but also aquaponic gardening as well. All right, so what we're looking at now is the last biofilter in line after the 3 different tanks that hold the fish. It goes into this instead of one of those standard biofilters in one of those garbage cans that you guys saw earlier. Let's go ahead and lift this guy up. Once again, he's got these cool little braces. It's kind of like, you know, when you guys open your car up and you put that little brace to hold your your trunk open or whatever. Kind of like that, and he even has a place to put it with a screw that's actually stainless steel so that it doesn't rust on the bottom. I really like, you know, how things are really well engineered here. But basically, this is like a 4-foot by 4-foot like grow bed from like a hydroponic store. And in the early days before he got his organic certification, he would actually use this bed to grow plants in and grow more food, you know, for the family. But nowadays, this acts as another biofilter, and this is a little bit different than the previous ones because this is not using those nylon scouring pads. And I want to stop on the nylon scouring pads for a second. If you're buying just standard nylon scouring pads from the grocery store, from the wherever you're buying them from, you got to be careful because some of them may be treated with antimicrobials, which is not good for your system. So you're going to want to make sure you get the ones that are not treated. So, you know, you might want to get these from a, you know, aquaponics store that's selling the right stuff for the right job instead of trying to save money and get at Walmart or something, right? So now I want to share with you guys actually what's going on in this biofilter here. It's more than just those rocks that we talked about. If we kind of move these rocks over to a little layer over here, if we look, oh my gosh, look at this. I don't know if you guys can see that. Well, I got some worms that are squirming all around. He's got actually worms in his system. Now, worms do not like being submerged in water. Very important. I don't know if it's ever rained really hard where you live and then the worms come out. Oh, look, there's a worm on my finger there. Wait, no, sorry. All right, let's put that guy back there. All right. So yeah, worms don't like, living underwater because they are not sea creatures, right? They're meant for the soil where it does naturally get wet, right? Now, the worms are free to roam around in this biofilter here that's always wet to a certain level, right? And they choose to stay right at the level, like the top of the water. So they got rocks to kind of brace themselves up on. And much like us, the worms need air. If they can't get air, they're gonna drown. Like a dolphin needs to come up for air every once in a while, right? Worms like that too. They're staying right above the water level. Yeah, they could get wet sometimes because soils get wet, but then they also dry out, right? So they stay right at that level so that they could stay alive. And guess what? They are great digesters of organic matter, like the fish poop that's coming into this bed. So they're doing their job to basically take out the particulate, the fish poop, and turn this into, in my opinion, some of the best plant food, the worm castings that are rich in nutrients for the plants. But not only just the nutrients, the worm castings are also beneficial in the beneficial microbes that are really good and have a symbiotic relationship with the root system of the plants. And in addition, in this bed here, besides the worms, if we dig deeper, another thing that does like the water underneath here is also the gamers. I mean, I could see them down there, but I'm not gonna be able to hold it up for you guys. Oh wait, here's one right here. Oh yeah, look, man, they're on that little rock. You see something little moving around. You guys won't be able to see that too good, but you'll see some little things moving around. And this is the gamers. And the gamers are like little crustacean-like creatures, related to shrimp, that once again, they're decomposing, the fish poop. And here's a really cool thing. One of the things I learned in one of my videos is about when you're feeding your worms, you want to feed your worms a rich chitin source. And guess what? The chitin is what actually is the exoskeleton of the gamers. So when the gamers probably, move on to the next life or whatever, they got their exoskeletons in there, and I'm sure the worms are also digesting them and making different nutrients in their worm castings. If you want to learn more about some of the best worm castings, hey, be sure to check that video. I'll put a link down below where I have a video on how to increase your yields by up to 400% by using the proper and best kind of worm castings that I share with you in that video, how you guys could actually make it yourself. And guess what? One of those secrets is the chitin, or things like the gamers shells in there. The other thing that's very important to feed your worms that most people do not feed them are high like cellulose material, such as cardboard boxes and things like that, right? Most people just feed their worms horse manure or something like that, or cow manure, which I'm not a big fan of manures because that could actually introduce pathogens into your gardening system. And actually that's one of the reasons why they have covers on everything. They want to keep things like bird poop out. I don't know if you guys heard, like years ago there was this big outbreak on spinach with the E. coli, man, and a big outbreak with E. coli and cantaloupe and all this stuff. And here's something I want to share with you guys that many of you guys might not know, right? Plants and animals do not share diseases. So I can't contract, STDs from a cantaloupe, right? But I can potentially contract STDs from another animal, like I think there's some STD out there that actually probably was, they say, contracted from monkeys. So, but we can't contract things from plants, right? But what happens is, if this was not covered, for example, if some foreign bird poop got in here, right, that may have E. coli on it, and animal poops may have, negative bacteria on it. And then they run rampant in the system that's not in check and have controls like beneficial microbes that's in this system that kick ass and break down the bad bacteria. That being said, although the system can potentially do that, they want to just keep that out of their system, right? And and have a really clean system so that that's not even an option of occurring. So I want to encourage you guys to especially wash your produce if there's bird poop on it and all this kind of stuff, because I'm all for, like, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger and stuff, but you could just take that saying a little bit too far sometimes. So yeah, that's why they cover it, and this is working like a really good system. It's like, once again, this is a lot of area because this is 4 feet by 4 feet, about 8 inches deep of just this is solid coral material on the bottom with some rocks on top where all the microbes and creatures are living. And I want to encourage you, whether you have an aquaponics setup like this, to have some kind of big area like this where you could have a lot of creatures, because they're doing a lot of the basically pre-digestion of the nutrients to make it more available for your plants, so that in general your system overall will just run that much better. And likewise in soil, right? We want to have the living creatures in the soil, whether that means you're going to have earthworms, whether that means you're going to have the beneficial bacteria and beneficial fungi like mycorrhiza. You know, I think all these things are super important in conventional agriculture, right? They're trying to wipe out everything in the soil because they don't want any contamination, because if they think any bacteria is normally bad bacteria and it's not good, right? But it's when we do this, things get out of balance, because once again, in nature, everything's auto-balancing, right? And as long as they balance out things like the pH in the water and some other things with the aquaponics, it's gonna do great, like you guys seen. So let's see, next we wanna take you to another few areas of the farm where they're actually raising some of the fish that they actually take out of these tanks to have on small scale available at some times, because right now they're pretty much focused on vegetable production and not really super big on the fish production. All right, so now I want to talk to you guys about the fish, because they are an integral part of the aquaponics system, because it's, after all, it's the fish that's making the fertilizer for your plants. What they have here is a huge basically tank that they made, and one of the cool things is what they're using here for the plastic, right? They're not using the standard, you know, vinyl stuff for like pond liners and all this stuff. They're using what I consider the best stuff to use as a pond liner. And this is an HDPE plastic. This is the hardest plastic. It's food grade, and it's the best one. Now, it is a pain to work with because it's pretty kind of like thick. It could crack on you and all this stuff, but it's the safest, you know, use, and that's what I would recommend if you guys were doing it. Should last definitely a good long time. And as you guys can see, we got, once again, you know, we got a biofilter here in a stock tank, and this one actually has a lift pump. So the lift pump is actually helping to aerate and create some oxygen in the biofilter, as well as, you know, in the tank here. Now, basically, if fish get too big in their standard aquaponics system, they get moved into this tank, which is kind of like a holding tank, and which is where they harvest their fish from for sale, because, you know, they don't want to tap in to their piggy bank, literally, because their fish is their piggy bank. The fish is making the nutrition to feed their vegetables, and if they just keep fishing out of their piggy bank, right, like one day there will be nothing left in there. So they take the extra guys, put them over here, and then, you know, sometimes they have babies and whatnot in here, then they separate them out. And because this is a tilapia, this is white Nile tilapia, and basically the best food for fish, or for most fish, is other fish. So, you know, the tilapia will have their babies, and actually they'll be carnivorous and they'll eat their babies, which sounds kind of crazy, but that's what they do. So they got to make sure they have regular feedings. And that's another cool thing that I've learned about the fish, is that they're actually on a time clock and a time cycle, because they're fed religiously 2 times a day at certain times, like 7 and 4, something like that. The fish know that at 4 o'clock, like, they're up at the water, they're biting, you know, they're ready to eat. Like, you guys are probably like ready to eat at 5 o'clock because we're on time cycles, right? I personally like to just eat when I'm hungry and not say, oh, I got to eat at 6 because it's 6, right? I eat whenever I'm hungry. Unfortunately, these fish do not get to eat when they're hungry. They get to eat when it's time. So actually, it's time now. So let me go ahead and feed them. And, you know, I want to talk about the feed here. So we're just feeding some little fish pellets, and it's very economical to feed the fish here. I think they buy like 2 bags of fish feed. I don't know, and with 2 bags of fish feed, it feeds the big bags, it feeds the fish for an entire month. And that's the only input that they're using, you know, for this system, aside from the oyster shell calcium, some iron that may be required, as well as the potassium. And yeah, so that's really cool. Now, the thing I want to really encourage you guys is pay attention to your fish food, right? Very important to get good fish food. There's some fish foods out there that are being made with corn, which is the first ingredient, and in my opinion, you know, GMO corn should not be fed to fish. You know, get a good solid fish food and read the ingredients, much like when you guys are buying things in the store. I mean, I don't even encourage you guys to buy things with ingredient labels, but if you're buying fish food, you know, you want to be able to pronounce everything in there, make sure there's not all these nasty additives, because think about it, you're eating basically the converted down poop of your fish. So you're eating secondhand this fish food here. And, you know, like, for example, in the standard agriculture industry, if you're buying factory farm meats and all this kind of stuff, they're feeding those cows GMOs, you know, GMO corn and soy, and pumping them up with antibiotics. That's basically being absorbed by the cow and other toxins in the environment, because animals are basically biologic accumulators. That means they accumulate everything, whether it's the foods that they can gain the weight or whether that's the toxins. They accumulate that, and then when you eat the food, you're getting the basically lifetime supply of the toxins and also the nutrients contained in the cow. So yeah, I gotta pay attention to the food here. Now we're gonna go ahead and feed some of the fish, and let's see if we get them to jump up to the top here. All right, there's one, and here's two. All right, yep, just fed the fish. So, you know, these fish are harvested, and, you know, there's not a super abundance of the fish while they do grow fairly fast. You know, once again, the primary focus is on the vegetables, so these are basically just sold to friends and whatnot because there's not a super large production at this point, and once again, this was not the whole intention to create a ton of fish. Now, the other thing I want to point out is that you want to make sure and check out your species that you get if you're doing aquaponics. So we are in the beautiful tropics here in Hawaii, and where, you know, it barely gets, like, it never gets freezing unless you're on top of the mountain. But, you know, the weather stays nice and warm, and the fish, like us, like certain atmospheric or weather conditions, right? I don't know, they probably like it in the 70s or whatever, you know, they like it pretty warm like we do. And if the tilapia get down to like 55, right, the fish aren't gonna make it. They're gonna not be living any longer, right? So if you live in areas that gets cold, you might not want to use tilapia unless you have like a heater system, right? So you may want to, you know, look into using other fish. In addition, in some states, even in Hawaii, it's illegal to import this kind of tilapia, but if they're already existing here, you know, you could move them around within state, but not bring them in from out of state. And I know many states, for example, Nevada, it's illegal to actually bring in tilapia and even use tilapia in your aquaponics grow. So you want to be aware of the laws and whatnot. So yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell this aquaponics system. I want to go ahead and take you to one other location and share some really important information about aquaponics with you before I go. So the last part of this video I want to share with you guys real quick is actually right here. We're in the last maybe approximately quarter of the backyard. The first 3 quarters basically has all the aquaponics set up. The last quarter approximately basically is what you see here. They just have a standard garden like many people do. But the thing that's interesting here is that if you look down at the soil that you guys could see, literally this is like sand. I mean, it reminds me of beach sand, and actually this has actually nicer sand than some of the beaches here because I went to a really rocky beach today. But this is just beach sand, and it is very difficult to grow in beach sand because of the beach sand. It drains so quickly and the nutrients basically just leach out. So after years and years of trying to grow in this stuff, that's where they came up with, hey, let's do it differently. Let's grow under aquaponics. You know, I live in Las Vegas. It's the desert, right? And in the desert, once again, the soil is not very good. So what I did instead is I brought in raised beds and built raised beds and brought in organic matter and brought in good soil to grow in. And I mean, that's what they also did here. I mean, aside from this moringa tree, which is a really nutritious tree that you guys should be aware about if you live in Hawaii or anywhere in the tropics, because this guy just literally grows. And what they did here is this tree was super tall and they basically hacked it off, and now it's reshooting. And many people don't know that the parts that you hack off, you can actually just stick back in the ground and it actually grow a new tree. I mean, this is a tree that everybody should have in their landscape. And other trees, think if all your trees on your property were edible trees and all your plants on your property were edible plants. I mean, that's how it is on my property. And I would encourage you guys to have more edible plants on your property, because think about it. If you have space, why not use that space to the best of your ability, right? Everybody has to eat every day, whether you're gonna buy your food at the grocery store, at a restaurant, or grow it yourself. And I think growing your own food is definitely one of the best ways. And making it easy by doing something like moringa that just grows year-round in the tropics, super simple. So another way they're doing it over there is a wicking bed that they have set up. And once again, they use some of the water from the fish, the aquaponics over here to feed their pepper plants. And this is another excellent way to conserve water in the upcoming years with droughts and all this kind of stuff coming on. Now, I've really enjoyed my time here. They're doing some amazing stuff with the aquaponics, but I always like to give my 2 cents in at the end. I mean, probably the one thing that I see the most about is, you know, I got to talk to the farmer in detail here, and you know, all the things he's ever heard about aquaponics and all this stuff is that, you know, the plants need this many nutrients and this is what we've done, this is what I got taught, and this is what I'm gonna do. But you know, they're basically feeding like about 13 nutrients or minerals to the plants. And you know, I tried to say, well, hey, why don't you try or experiment with to see what happens if you fed 70 to 90 minerals. I mean, that's what I try to do in my garden. I put things like the rock dust and the sea solids or ocean grown, ocean solution or C90 and other products in there to add minerals to my garden because I believe they are essential. And I know many of you guys out there are already on the trace minerals, whether you're using rock dust or sea solids in your grow. And I'm sure you guys, I know you guys see the results because I see when you guys post down the video. But you know, a lot of people seem to be stuck in their ways with, you know, all this kind of stuff like, oh, we've been doing it this way and it always been working. And you know, I always want to encourage you guys to try things out. Even if you don't believe me, I don't care if you don't believe me or whatever, you think I'm full of whatever. You know, I want you guys to experiment on your own and find out for yourself, because that's how I learned about rock dust. When I heard about rock dust, I'm like, yeah, why you need that stuff, right? It's not going to do anything. But when I started buying it, incorporating it, and using it, I'll tell you, it does make a difference. My plants are healthier. My plants are more bug and disease resistant. My plants taste better, they grow faster, and they yield more. I mean, what more could you ask for? And then the other thing is that when I eat the plants, now I'm getting the trace minerals in them instead of taking like Centrum A to Z of zinc, right? Basically what I'm trying to do is duplicate nature in the most ideal sense. And yes, it may not be as sustainable it is, but you know, that's not necessarily, my goal is being as sustainable as possible, but one of my bigger goals is to be as healthy as I can, because I almost lost my life when I was younger, and you only ever realize how important your life is and your health is, you know, right when you're gonna lose it. So I was glad I was given a second chance to be able to make these videos and share these videos with people. And I was glad that I was able to visit the farmer today and talk to him about experimenting with, you know, some of the trace minerals. Hopefully he does that in his garden, and next time I visit Maui, I'm gonna come here. And although he has really Ono stuff now, and you wanna check from currently at Whole Foods, you know, he's gonna have better stuff in the future and a more productive garden, in my opinion, that's gonna grow even faster than it is, which is gonna ramp up his production and hopefully make it so he's more than just breaking even, but actually making a profit and being able to do what he wants to do in life, waking up every day, enjoying his fish, his nature, his garden, and his family-owned farm here. I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode today. Be sure to check my links down below for some videos on trace minerals that I'll link down below. There's some of the sea solids and the rock dust. If I did have this grow operation like he has here, I would, number one, incorporate rock dust such as the azomite micronized version in like a filter sock into my different grow beds to make sure that you know, my plants and the fish got the minerals they need. And of course I would experiment, start off small and not add too much of anything, because it might throw off your balances of whatnot in there. The other thing I would do, very important, is I would foliar feed, so it would not really get in contact with the water, but I'd foliar feed the plants. Much like we could absorb things through our skin, they have transdermal patches of vitamins and estrogen for women and all this kind of stuff. Now, plants, besides the root zone, which is how they absorb things, they also absorb things through their leaves. So I'd foliar feed on, I don't know, maybe like once or twice a month, some of the trace minerals. And you know, like many people have seen, you could see some, you know, fairly quick results just by doing a foliar feed. Another thing I would do, although he has really good beneficial microorganisms and a lot going on, I would also brew personally a compost tea for like 12 to 24 hours, a good quality compost tea such as the Boogie Brew compost tea, and then add that to my system, which would add more basically beneficial microbes. You know, it's these microbes that break down nutrients, make them bioavailable for the plant, and they like to live around the root zone. So I might even do a root drench of the plants in their little starter packs as they're growing on that little table to introduce them early on in the stage, so that all through the plant's life they got the microbes that they need to survive, as well as they're gonna have the minerals to survive. And in this way, I believe, you know, that's one of the best ways to grow food, whether you're growing on a farm or whether you're just growing for food for you and your family. So hopefully after watching this episode, you've learned more about the aquaponics here, how they're doing it, how they're growing literally in a backyard. I mean, I took my backyard, put raised beds. He took his backyard and did aquaponics. I'm for all these different ways to grow food, to get fresher food, to get better food out to people. And especially in this day and age, if the ship stops coming in on Maui, people are not gonna be able to eat, except he'll still have 3,000 heads of lettuce that he can continually harvest, you know. And once he gets on a solar system, he'll be able to drive all his pumps, all his you know, oxygen creating pumps and all this stuff with solar to be, you know, more sustainable, and he loses very little water, just 5%. I mean, as long as he stays up with his system, this is definitely one good way to grow food. I guess for now, I'm gonna stick with my soil-based system because I travel so much, and trying to do this and travel, I don't think it would work too good. Anyways, be sure to subscribe to my videos if you're not already. I have over 1,000 videos that you guys could glean all kinds of information from, become a better gardener, become a better grower, and more importantly, you know, get some motivation to start growing today, you know. Even if you guys are watching this right now in the middle of winter time, there are ways you guys could grow in the middle of winter in an apartment in New York City. It's called Sprouts and Microgreens. I want to point this out to you guys, and I want you guys to grow any way you can, whether it's growing plants to eat or whether it's growing your mind and you know, thinking up new ideas and new things to think about, you know, because once you start stagnating, you know, that in my opinion is when you start getting old, and I'm not old yet. So anyways, once again, my name is John Kohler with GrowingYourGreens.com. We'll see you next time, and until then, keep on growing. This is John Kohler with GrowingYourGreens.com. Today we have another exciting